Chapter 1: Scales for Love. The title glared at me from my phone screen. The Dragon Scales. A romance fantasy novel. Beastmen, magic, betrayal, heartbreak. All that juicy, dramatic mess that keeps readers hooked. I'd only started it out of boredom last night. Now, here I was, sprawled on my bed with crumbs on my shirt, reading like my life depended on it. And already I was furious. The story opened on a gorgeous scene. The male lead, Daniel, a dragon beastman, no less. Dragons in this world were basically living miracles. Born rarely, their bodies overflowed with strength, their blood infused with magic, their scales harder than steel and more valuable than gold. Naturally, everyone wanted a piece of them. Daniel, however, wasn't some greedy tyrant. No, he was stupidly, devastatingly in love. And the one he loved? His human spouse. Lucas? I muttered, pinching the bridge of my nose. I swear, if you give him one more. On the glowing screen, Daniel smiled softly, tilting his head so his black hair fell into his golden eyes. If it makes you feel better, I don't mind. Then, with fingers far too gentle for the brutal act, he plucked a shimmering scale from his own chest. I winced. Holy shit. The text described it in detail. The faint ripping sound, the blood welling beneath, the raw skin left exposed. He didn't even let himself cry out. He just curled the bleeding scale in his palm and offered it like a gift. And his spouse? The bastard just took it. No hesitation. No shame. Thank you, Daniel. This will help me stay healthy, the human said sweetly, not even glancing at the spreading red stain on Daniel's shirt. I wanted to hurl my phone across the room. You selfish trash. Do you even know what you're holding? I shouted into my pillow. My neighbors probably thought I was insane. The scene shifted. A small figure peeked from the doorway. Their son. Half dragon, half human, big bright eyes brimming with tears. The poor kid, watching his father weaken day after day, shoulders trembling as another scale was torn free. But Daniel never once explained the pain. He just smiled and said, "It's for your dad. Don't worry." I gritted my teeth. God, I could see it. The boy's fists clutching his shirt. The way his lips trembled but no words came out. He wanted to scream, to cry, to stop it. But he was too young, too afraid of losing the fragile warmth of his family. Damn it. This is the worst kind of tragedy bait. I groaned, flopping back on my bed. I kept reading, unable to stop even as my blood boiled. Every time the spouse asked, Daniel gave another scale. Sometimes he flinched. Sometimes he bled so badly he nearly collapsed. But he never refused. All because of love. Love, my ass. What kind of love demanded your body piece by piece until nothing was left? What kind of spouse watched you bleed and smiled like it was nothing? Daniel was a dragon, for crying out loud. Strong enough to burn cities, majestic enough to be worshipped as a god. And yet here he was, reduced to a pathetic fool by affection. I slammed my phone against the mattress. You're an idiot, Daniel. A gorgeous, loyal, hopeless idiot. The chapter ended with Daniel tucking his son into bed. His shirt still damp with blood, his skin aching, his smile as tender as ever. The little boy whispered, "Father, does it hurt?" Daniel's hand paused mid-stroke in the child's hair. Then he laughed softly, shaking his head. "Not at all. As long as your dad is safe, I can endure anything." My chest twisted. The son didn't believe it. I didn't believe it. No one with a working brain would believe it. And yet Daniel, he believed in his own lie. I stared at the glowing screen long after the words blurred together. This world was cruel. Dragons were priceless, and that made them vulnerable. Daniel had everything: power, rarity, love to give. But instead of treasuring him, the people closest to him were bleeding him dry. I squeezed my phone so tight my knuckles cracked. If I were there, I'd drag that scumbag spouse out by the collar. I'd slap some sense into Daniel's thick head. And I'd tell that poor kid the truth, that his father's love shouldn't have to hurt like this. I muttered darkly, but I wasn't there. I was just a reader, watching, cursing, helpless. Still, as I scrolled to the next chapter, one thought burned in me like fire. This story had better give Daniel the happiness he deserved, or I was gonna lose my damn mind. Chapter 2, The Healer's Shadow. I should have known it would get worse. Tragedy novels don't stop at bleeding you once. They wring you dry. And sure enough, the next chapter introduced a new character. The so-called healer. He appeared in the village square like he owned the place. Tall, handsome, with a smile too bright to be trusted. The narration practically drooled over him. Clear skin, silky blonde hair, eyes like the summer sky. If Daniel was the kind of beauty that made you think of gods carved from stone, this guy was the opposite: warm, charming, approachable, and slimy. Oh, so very slimy. Because who was waiting with open hands to receive Daniel's freshly plucked scale? Not the spouse. No, the spouse delivered it to this healer. Ah, thank you. With this, I'll be able to craft a tonic that strengthens the body. For someone as delicate as you, it's absolutely necessary. The healer said smoothly, his fingers brushing against the spouse's hand just a little too long. The spouse blushed. Blushed. I sat up in bed, choking on my own spit. Excuse me. Did you just... Oh, hell no. I yelled at my phone. And then, because this author clearly wanted me to die of rage, the healer leaned in close, murmuring something about how fragile beauty must be cherished. Their lips brushed. A kiss. A freaking kiss. Are you kidding me? I shouted so loudly my downstairs neighbor thumped the ceiling. Meanwhile, where was Daniel? Back home. Bleeding. Smiling like a fool while he tended the fire. He thought he was saving his beloved spouse's life, never imagining that the scales he gave so painfully were being used as love tokens. I wanted to strangle someone. Actually, scratch that, I wanted to strangle both of them. The healer for being a manipulative parasite, and the spouse for being the absolute lowest of lowlifes. And Daniel, oh Daniel, why was he like this? Strong enough to split mountains, wings large enough to blot out the sky, and yet his greatest weakness was love. He never once questioned why his spouse needed tonics. He never once asked why the healer had to be the one to prepare them. No, Daniel just believed. Because in his eyes, the spouse's smile was worth more than all the scales on his body. I groaned into my pillow. You dumb dragon. You hopeless, lovesick dumbass. And the kid? Oh, don't get me started. The boy had been left behind once again. While his other parent fluttered around with the healer, and Daniel exhausted himself to keep the household running, the child was quietly burdened with everything else. Fetching water, cleaning the floors, chopping vegetables that were too big for his small hands. His father never complained, so neither did he. But I could see it. The way the boy's eyes lingered on his father's weary figure. The way his lips pressed together whenever Daniel swayed from dizziness after losing another scale. He wanted to help. He wanted to scream. He wanted someone to care about him. But no one did. The spouse barely looked at him anymore, too busy batting eyelashes at the healer. Daniel smiled and patted his head but then returned to his suffering, thinking it was all for love. So the boy worked harder, hoping maybe, just maybe, if he made himself useful enough, they'd notice him. My chest ached. This is child neglect. I swear to God, if I could reach into this book, I'd adopt that kid myself. Give him a damn hug. Teach him his letters. Buy him toys. Anything but this nightmare. I muttered, pacing my room like a madman. The healer, of course, kept pushing boundaries. Every time he appeared, the spouse's eyes lit up like fireworks. Every time he spoke, he slipped in another backhanded compliment about Daniel. Dragon scales are wasted on mere medicine. But for you, of course, it's different. You deserve everything. Wasted? Sir, those scales come with blood attached. I bellowed. Daniel, the love-struck fool, never even caught on. He just kept giving, kept smiling, kept convincing himself that the pain was nothing compared to his spouse's happiness. It made me want to tear my hair out. By the end of the chapter, I was practically vibrating with fury. The spouse had kissed the healer. The healer had pocketed another scale. Daniel was pale, his strength draining, but still whispering sweet nothings about how love conquers pain. And the sun. The poor boy was left staring at the floor, clutching a bucket of water with trembling hands, completely unseen. I slammed my phone shut, breathing hard. This is not a love story. This is abuse with extra sparkles. I wanted to delete the book out of phone, but I couldn't, because despite my rage, despite every red flag waving like a parade, I had to know what happened next. And I already knew myself too well. I was going to keep reading, and I was going to keep cursing every step of the way. Chapter 3, Talk of Divorce. If I thought The Healer's Kiss was the worst this novel could throw at me, I was wrong. So wrong. Because this chapter, it hit like a hammer to the chest. It started with a conversation, not a fight, not a dramatic showdown, just casual cruelty, the kind that slices deeper than shouting ever could. Daniel sat at the edge of the bed, his hands folded, his face pale. He'd clearly just given another scale. His shirt was spotted with blood, the raw wound hidden beneath fabric. He smiled faintly, golden eyes dim but warm. Across from him, the spouse sighed, twirling the newly delivered scale between delicate fingers. Daniel, don't you ever wonder if this marriage is the right path for us? I froze, staring at the line on my phone. No. Don't you dare, I hissed. Daniel blinked, clearly caught off guard. What do you mean? The spouse tucked a strand of hair behind their ear and sighed again, all weary elegance, as if they were the victim here. I think we're not compatible. You're always so serious, so devoted. And me, well, I need more. Someone who understands me. I clenched my fists. You've got to be kidding me. You've got a dragon who worships the ground you walk on? And you're whining about compatibility? Daniel flinched. Just a flicker, but enough for me to feel it in my bones. Still, he smiled. Always smiling. If that's what you need, I'll try harder. Try harder. I slammed my pillow over my face and screamed into it. Daniel, you absolute clown. He's cheating on you. He's rubbing it in your face. And you're... what? Signing up for extra credit love homework. And just when I thought my blood pressure couldn't climb higher, the scene shifted. Because someone else had heard everything. The boy. He stood in the hallway, barefoot, clutching a small towel. He'd probably been on his way to help with chores again. But now his little hands trembled, and his eyes were wide and wet. Mother wants to leave? He whispered. So quiet the narration said no one heard him. Except me. I heard it. And I swear, it broke something in me. The kid slipped back into his room, silent tears sliding down his cheeks. He curled up under thin blankets, biting his lip to stop himself from sobbing aloud. I could almost hear his thoughts. If mother leaves, will father leave too? Will I be alone? Did I do something wrong? I pressed my palm to my chest. No, kid. No. You did nothing wrong. It's them. It's those selfish adults who don't deserve you. For the first time, I wasn't just mad. I was gutted. Meanwhile, Daniel sat there, nodding like some kind of saint. If you're unhappy, I'll do whatever it takes. Just stay with me. Stay with our son. I'll give you every scale if that's what it means. He reached for the spouse's hand. They pulled away. My jaw dropped. Did you just? You rejected him? Him? A dragon? Do you know how rare he is? Do you know what people would pay for even a single scale? I shouted at my screen. And then I laughed, bitter and sharp. God, this is insane. The healer doesn't even deserve his toenail clippings, let alone him. The chapter dragged on with Daniel clinging to hope like a fool. Every gentle word, every promise, every sacrifice. All for someone who had already packed their heart and moved it into another man's hands. I wanted to shake him. You're a dragon. You should be flying over mountains, tearing through armies, scaring the crap out of kings. Not kneeling in your own house begging a faithless spouse to love you back. But of course he couldn't hear me. He just sat there, bleeding from another wound, smiling that same soft smile, convincing himself that love could fix what was already shattered. By the end, I wasn't even pacing anymore. I was slumped against the wall, drained, staring at my screen like it had personally ruined my life. The spouse was planning their escape. The healer was waiting with open arms. Daniel was bleeding body and soul. And the boy was curled up in silence, trying not to cry where no one would see. I rubbed my temples. This story isn't just tragic. It's cruel. And if this author doesn't give them justice, I'm marching into this book myself. I muttered. I didn't know then how close that thought was to becoming reality. Chapter 4, Transmigration. I thought I'd reached my limit. Truly. Cheating, lying, neglect, betrayal. The novel had already served me every flavor of misery. I was this close to rage quitting, chucking my phone into the wall, and swearing off fantasy romances forever. But no, the author wasn't done torturing me yet. Because this chapter made me question if I was the reader or the victim. It began with the spouse's voice, smooth and sharp as a dagger. If you want me to stay, Daniel, give me more scales. My throat went dry. There he was again, Daniel kneeling like some tragic hero. His chest already scarred, his skin pale from blood loss. And still. His eyes were soft, his smile gentle. If that's what it takes, I'll do it. For you. For our son. He whispered. Don't, I muttered, gripping my phone so tightly it creaked. Don't you dare. But he did. Of course he did. The spouse leaned forward, fingers curling around one of the glimmering scales near Daniel's collarbone. There was no hesitation, no tenderness, just greed. Rip. The sound made my stomach lurch. Daniel's body jolted, his breath hissing between clenched teeth. Blood welled instantly, soaking his shirt. And yet he didn't fight back. He didn't even frown. It's all right as long as you stay, he whispered. The spouse sneered. Actually sneered. Then bleed more, dragon. Show me how much you love me. I shot up from my bed. You monster. That's not love. That's butchery. Daniel's body swayed. His knees buckled. The strength of a dragon, brought down by endless devotion. His golden eyes flickered with pain but still held no anger. Then he collapsed. Right there on the floor, blood pooling beneath him, wings trembling faintly as though even they couldn't shield him anymore. Father! The boy's voice cracked like glass. He rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside Daniel. Tiny hands shook as they tried to wipe the blood away, tried to hold his father's much larger hand. Please wake up. Don't leave me, Father. The sight gutted me. The kid's tears hit Daniel's skin, mixing with the blood, as he shook and begged and wailed. And the spouse, the body I wanted to strangle, just stood there, lips curled, eyes cold. I couldn't take it anymore. Stop! Stop! Don't just stand there. Help him! Damn it! I shouted at my screen. And then it happened. A wave of dizziness slammed into me. My phone slipped from my hand, clattering against the floor. My vision blurred, colors bleeding into each other like spilled ink. What the hell? I gasped, clutching my head. The room tilted. My bed vanished. My walls dissolved. The air thickened, hot and metallic, heavy with the copper scent of blood. I tried to move, but my body wasn't mine anymore. My heartbeat thundered. Not in my chest, but somewhere else. Someone else. Then silence. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't staring at my cracked ceiling. I was staring down at Daniel, bleeding, unconscious, his face far too pale, his son crying desperately at his side. And my hands were smeared with blood. Not my blood. His. I looked down further. The clothes weren't mine. The body wasn't mine. The reflection in the nearby water basin. Pale face, sharp chin, the cold eyes of the spouse. It wasn't me. It was him, the bastard spouse. I stumbled back, breath catching in my throat. No. This isn't possible. But Daniel's blood on my hands was very real. His shallow breathing was very real. The boy's broken sobs were very real. And the horror hit me like lightning. I wasn't just reading the story anymore. I was in it. Dad, please don't die, the boy wailed, shaking Daniel's shoulder. His little voice cracked, raw with terror. Daniel groaned faintly, eyelids fluttering. Even at death's door, his hand twitched toward the spouse, toward me. "Don't leave me," he whispered, voice so faint it was barely sound. My chest clenched. This wasn't a character anymore. This wasn't words on a screen. This was a man, a dragon, broken and bleeding because of the body I now inhabited. Because of me. I dropped to my knees, hands shaking as I reached for him. I'm not. I stopped, throat tightening. No explanation would make sense. No excuse would undo the damage. But one thing I knew for certain, I wasn't going to let him suffer like this anymore. I pressed my trembling hands against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. The boy looked at me with wide, mistrustful eyes, as if unsure why his cruel mother was suddenly panicking. But I didn't care. I had one goal now: save Daniel. Even if I had to fight this cursed story itself, I was going to keep him alive. Chapter 5: The New Spouse. I always thought transmigration novels were fun. You laugh at the protagonist fumbling around in a new world. You cheer when they slap villains, you swoon when romance happens. But being in one? Yeah. Not fun. Not even a little. Because right now, I was kneeling in a pool of dragon blood, and the man I'd spent 4 chapters yelling at from the safety of my bed was about to die in my arms. "Shit! Shit! Shit! Don't you dare die on me!" I muttered, pressing my hands harder against the gaping wound where the scale had been ripped away. Warm blood seeped through my fingers, sticky and horrifyingly real. Daniel's breath was shallow, his golden eyes half-lidded. Even unconscious, his expression was calm, almost peaceful, like he was used to this. Used to bleeding, used to hurting. That realization made my throat burn. The boy, our son now, apparently, was kneeling opposite me, little hands trembling as he clutched his father's arm. His eyes were red from crying, his face blotchy. But when he looked at me, it wasn't grief I saw. It was fury. You did this to him. You always hurt him." His small voice cracked with anger. My heart stopped. He was right. At least, the original spouse was. My voice faltered. What the hell was I supposed to say? That his cruel, selfish parent had conveniently been replaced by some random fan who swore too much? That I'd never touch a single scale again because I wasn't that person anymore? Not exactly believable. So I did the only thing I could. I focused on saving Daniel. "Listen, get me cloth. Clean ones. Now," I said, voice sharp because panicking wouldn't help. The boy blinked at me like I'd grown a second head. "What? Cloth?" I snapped, then forced myself to soften my tone. "Please. For your dad, hurry." For a moment I thought he'd refuse. His mistrust was plain as day. His little mouth pressed into a thin line. But then his gaze dropped to Daniel's pale face, and with a sniffle he scrambled to his feet and ran. As soon as he was gone, I bent over Daniel again. "You stupid, stubborn dragon. Giving your scales away like candy. If you die now, I swear I'll—" My voice cracked. "No, you're not dying. Not on my watch." The boy returned with torn bedsheets. I ripped them into strips and pressed them against the wound, binding them as tightly as I could. My hands shook the whole time, but I refused to stop. Daniel groaned faintly, head turning toward me. For a split second, golden eyes flickered open and landed on me. I froze. There was no hatred there, no accusation, just confusion, and the faintest glimmer of something that looked dangerously like hope. "Rest, I've got you. Just rest," I whispered, forcing the words out. His lips parted like he wanted to speak, but no sound came out. His hand twitched weakly, then fell limp again. When I finally sat back, my makeshift bandages were soaked through but holding. His breathing was still shallow, but steadier than before. The boy knelt by his father's side, clutching his hand. He cast a wary look at me, like he couldn't decide if this sudden kindness was some cruel trick. Why are you helping him now?" he whispered, voice thick with tears. I swallowed hard. How could I explain? That I wasn't the monster who had hurt them. That I didn't know how long I'd be here. But as long as I would never let this happen again. I was wrong. I won't hurt him anymore. I promise. I said simply because it was the only truth I could give. My throat tightened. The boy's eyes narrowed, searching my face for a lie. He didn't trust me. Not yet. But he didn't pull his father's hand away either. Hours passed like that. The boy dozed off, leaning against Daniel's arm. I sat on the cold floor, watching the rise and fall of Daniel's chest, terrified it would stop at any moment. I should have been freaking out about transmigrating, about being trapped in the body of the story's most hated character. But all I could think about was the warmth seeping into my palms, where they rested on Daniel's bandaged chest. This wasn't a scene in a book anymore. This was a man who had suffered too much, a boy who deserved better, and me, stuck here but maybe with the chance to change something. I clenched my fists. Fine. If fate was going to shove me into this story, then I'd rewrite it myself. No more scales, no more blood, and no more tears for Daniel and his son. Chapter 6, First Gentle Acts. I never thought my first day in another world would be spent elbow-deep in raw vegetables. But hey, life comes at you fast. And apparently so does the judgment of a very small child. The kitchen, or what passed for one, was cramped and smoky, with a battered wooden table, a fireplace doubling as a stove, and shelves full of ingredients I barely recognized. A pile of roots sat in front of me, half chopped, half butchered. I muttered under my breath as my borrowed knife skidded across the cutting board. Why couldn't I transmigrate into a rich, noble family? No, it had to be the dirt-poor cheating spouse of a bleeding dragon. Thanks, universe. From the doorway, the boy stared at me like I'd grown horns. His arms were crossed, his small face pinched with suspicion. Every time I fumbled the knife, his little eyebrow twitched. What? I asked, then immediately regretted it. His eyes narrowed further, and he hugged himself like he was preparing for the cruelty he always expected. I sighed, forcing my tone softer. Look, I'm just cooking. For you. And your father. Nobody's dying today. He blinked, clearly unconvinced. The soup, if you could call it that, looked like swamp water by the time I ladled it into bowls. I chopped the vegetables too big, added way too much salt, and nearly burned the bottom, but at least it was warm. I set the bowls on the table with as much dignity as I could muster. Dinner, I announced. The boy eyed the food like it was poison. Try it. I didn't spend an hour wrestling those carrots for nothing. I urged. His lips pursed. Slowly, suspiciously, he dipped his spoon into the soup. He lifted it to his mouth, hesitated, then sipped. His eyes widened. Not because it was good, hell no, but because it wasn't bad. Edible. Warm. Different from the cold leftovers he was probably used to eating alone. I held my breath. Well, it's okay, he muttered, refusing to look at me. Relief hit me so hard I nearly collapsed. I knew it. I am a culinary genius. That was when Daniel shuffled into the room, pale and unsteady, one hand pressed against his bandaged chest. My heart lurched. Hey, what are you doing out of bed? Sit down before you fall over. He paused, startled, then slowly lowered himself into a chair. His golden eyes flickered from me to the steaming bowls, confusion clear in his expression. You cooked. I bristled defensively. What? Surprised I know how to hold a spoon. It's not great, but it's better than nothing. He studied me, suspicion warring with something softer. Then he picked up his spoon, blew on the soup and took a cautious sip. A beat of silence. Then, quietly, thank you. The words were so gentle, so unexpected, that I almost dropped my own bowl. Don't mention it, seriously, don't. My ego can't handle it. I muttered quickly, looking away. We ate in silence after that. Awkward silence, but not hostile. The boy slurped his soup slowly, sneaking glances at me like he was waiting for me to snap. Daniel kept his head bowed, as if savoring something he hadn't tasted in a long time. Not the soup, but the simple act of being cared for. And me? I just sat there, realizing how badly this family had been starved of the most basic kindness. When the bowls were empty, Daniel set his spoon down and looked at me again. His eyes lingered, searching. I straightened, forcing the words out before I could lose my nerve. I'm never touching your scales again. The boy froze. Daniel stiffened. I swallowed hard, meeting his gaze. Not for medicine. Not for love. Not for anything. You hear me? You're not a larder to be picked clean. You're... My throat caught, but I forced the words through. You're a person. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with disbelief. Daniel's eyes trembled, but he said nothing. He just looked at me like he wanted to believe, but couldn't risk it. The boy turned his face away, lips pressed tight, hiding whatever storm was in his small chest. I leaned back, letting out a shaky breath. Maybe they didn't trust me yet. Maybe they never would. But I'd made my vow, and this time I meant it. Chapter 7: A Wary Household. If I thought cooking a passable soup was enough to prove I wasn't a monster anymore, I was wrong. Trust isn't won in a single meal. Not when the scars of the past are still written on someone's skin. And in this house, those scars ran deep. The boy was the first to test me. He didn't do it openly, of course. He was small, but not stupid. He'd learned to survive by tiptoeing around his so-called mother, careful not to draw too much attention. But now he was watching me. Every move, every word. If I raised my voice too suddenly, his shoulders would stiffen. If I reached for something near him, his body would flinch, just a fraction, as though bracing for the cruelty he'd known before. And every time it happened, my chest tightened. Came to a head one morning. I found him standing on a stool, reaching up to grab a bucket of water from the high shelf. The thing was half his size, heavy enough to tip him right over. "Hey, what are you doing?" I called, rushing forward. He froze like a deer caught in headlights, the bucket wobbling dangerously. I was going to fetch water," he stammered, gripping the handle tight. My gut twisted. He wasn't just trying to be useful, he was trying to prove his worth, to keep himself safe from neglect. I approached slowly, careful not to spook him. "Listen, champ. Buckets that big aren't meant for kids your size. You'll break your arms before you get it halfway full." He glared at me, chin jutting out stubbornly. "You'll just get mad if I don't do it." The words hit harder than a slap. I crouched down to his level, forcing myself to meet his eyes. "No, I won't. Not anymore. You hear me? If you can't carry it, then I'll do it. That's my job. Yours is, I don't know, growing up safe, learning, being a kid." His glare wavered. His hands trembled around the handle. "Liar," he whispered. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "Then test me. Refuse. Say no. See if I get mad. Go on." He blinked, startled. For a long moment he just stared at me. Then, slowly, he let go of the bucket. It landed with a dull thunk. He stepped back, watching me like he expected a storm. But I only smiled, grabbed the bucket, and said, "See? No yelling. Just me carrying this oversized thing because I've got the muscles for it." I carried it out the door, leaving him frozen in silence behind me. Later that day, I caught Daniel watching me. He sat at the table, golden eyes thoughtful, expression unreadable. His bandaged chest rose and fell slowly, still weak but improving. "You're different," he said quietly. I swallowed, suddenly self-conscious under that gaze. Different good or different bad? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, his eyes lowered, lingering on the scars crisscrossing his chest where scales had once been torn away. My stomach nodded. The memory of ripping those scales, of the spouse's greedy hands, of Daniel's silent endurance, flashed in my head, even though it wasn't me who had done it. But the body I wore had. I forced myself to look at him. Really look. Each scar was a wound I couldn't erase, a reminder of the cruelty that had carved itself into his flesh. "I'm sorry," I whispered before I could stop myself. Daniel's head jerked slightly, as if he hadn't expected that. "I don't care what excuse there was before, you didn't deserve any of this. Not the pain. Not the lies. Not the scars," I said, voice rough. For a long moment, silence filled the room. The boy sat quietly beside his father, eyes wide, clearly listening. Finally, Daniel shook his head faintly. "You're strange." A humorless laugh escaped me. Yeah, guess so. But I meant every word. That night, lying on the thin mattress, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's body. Those scars, those wounds, that fragile smile he wore like armor. And I felt guilt, sharp and suffocating. Because even if it wasn't my crime, I was the one here now. In this body, in this role. And it was my responsibility to make it right. No matter how long it took, I would prove it. To the boy, to Daniel. This household had been a place of pain. But I'd turn it into something else. Place of safety. Place of trust. Maybe even someday a place of love. Chapter 8, The Healer Returns. I was starting to think maybe I could handle this new life. I'd survived cooking without poisoning anyone. The kid hadn't called me a monster for 2 whole days. Daniel had even accepted my help without flinching. Which was exactly when the universe decided to throw the biggest wrench into my fragile progress. The healer came back. It was mid-afternoon when a sharp knock rattled the door. The boy froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. Daniel tensed, golden eyes narrowing. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to open it, already muttering, "Who the hell visits uninvited in the middle of the day?" And there he was, glossy black hair tied neatly at his nape, robes trimmed in green, practically screaming, "Look at me, I'm important." A smile too smooth to be sincere. The infamous NPC healer. "Darling, I was beginning to worry," he said warmly, eyes raking over me. Every nerve in my body recoiled. He stepped inside without permission, carrying that air of entitlement like a perfume. His gaze darted toward Daniel, lingering on the bandages, before returning to me. "I trust you've kept up our arrangements? Your husband's scales. I'll need more soon. You wouldn't want to fall behind, would you?" His voice was silken, calculated. Behind him, Daniel's shoulders stiffened, jaw tightening. The boy clutched his spoon like a weapon, glaring. And me? I nearly exploded. "Are you insane? Do you hear yourself? You're standing in my house asking for my husband's flesh like it's candy." I snapped. The healer blinked, startled by the tone. Then he chuckled, tilting his head. "Ah, I see. Playing coy today, are we? But you know as well as I, his scales are medicine. Vital for your strength. For your beauty. You've always wanted more, haven't you?" My stomach turned. So the old spouse had actually... Ugh. Let me make something clear. I don't care if his scales cure baldness, make wine taste better, or open the gates of heaven. I'm not taking another damn one. Ever. I hissed. The smile slid off his face. His eyes hardened. "You're serious?" he asked softly, dangerously. "Dead serious." I shot back. His hand lifted, brushing my arm in a mock gentle caress. "You'll regret this, you know. He's weak, fragile. What will you do when you tire of him? When you remember what you used to want?" I yanked my arm away like his touch burned. Newsflash. I already regret plenty. But the one thing I won't regret is protecting Daniel. For a moment, silence stretched taut between us. His gaze sharpened, calculating. Finally, he leaned close, voice low. "Careful, darling. You can pretend you're different, but I know what you are. I know your sins. And if you don't come to me willingly..." His lips curved into a cruel smile. "I'll make sure everyone else knows too." Threats. Of course. Classic villain move. I forced a laugh, sharp and humorless. "Go ahead. Announce it to the whole damn kingdom if you want. It doesn't change the fact that you're a parasite feeding off someone else's pain. And if you ever come back here..." I stepped closer, meeting his eyes with every ounce of fury in me. "You'll regret it more than I ever could." He stared at me, stunned, maybe even a little unsettled. Then, with a tight smile, he bowed mockingly. "Very well. But don't forget, you can't erase the past so easily. I'll be back." His footsteps retreated, the door shutting with a sharp thud. I let out a shaky breath, my hands trembling. The boy was still frozen at the table, eyes wide. Daniel sat stiffly, watching me with something unreadable in his gaze. Had he heard all of it? Of course he had. He always heard everything. I turned, meeting his eyes, my chest pounding. I meant it, no more scales. Not now. Not ever. I said softly. For a long moment he said nothing, just stared, as though weighing every syllable, every flicker of emotion in my face. Then he lowered his gaze, the faintest spark of something fragile and dangerous flickering in his golden eyes. Hope. That night, long after the boy had gone to bed, I sat awake replaying the scene in my head. The healer's smirk, his threats, the way Daniel had looked at me afterward. I'd burned a bridge I could never rebuild. But honestly, good. Some bridges deserved to burn. And if that smug bastard came back, he'd find out the hard way. This spouse wasn't his puppet anymore. Chapter 9, Trust begins. The boy had been watching me like a hawk ever since the healer's little visit. Not that I could blame him. He probably expected me to cave, to go crawling back to that snake with Daniel's scales in a pouch. But I hadn't. And maybe, just maybe, it planted the tiniest seed of doubt in his mistrust. I was determined to water it. Later, I found him sulking at the table, chin propped on his arms. Bored? I asked. He didn't answer, just shrugged. Well, time for school, I said, dragging a piece of charcoal and a scrap of paper over. His head snapped up. School? Yeah, letters, numbers, you know, stuff that makes your brain grow big and scary. I scribbled a shakia on the paper and held it up. This is the first letter. Say it with me. He frowned suspiciously. Why? Because if you can read, you can learn anything. If you can count, you'll never be cheated in a market. And if you're really good, maybe you'll grow up smarter than me. That's not hard, he muttered. I gasped dramatically. Ouch. My pride. But he was already leaning closer, curiosity peeking through his defenses. We spent the afternoon like that. Him copying wobbly letters, me correcting with exaggerated patience, both of us bickering lightly. Every time he got one right, I cheered like he'd won a tournament, and though he tried to hide it, his chest puffed a little. When his hand cramped, I massaged his fingers gently. He stiffened, startled by the touch, but didn't pull away. For a moment, I thought, this is what a real parent should have been doing all along. What I didn't realize was that we weren't alone. From the shadow of the doorway, Daniel was watching. His tall frame leaned against the wall, golden eyes soft but unreadable. He said nothing, didn't interrupt, just observed. When our eyes finally met, he didn't look away. Something flickered there. Something fragile, like the first spark of fire struggling to stay lit. Trust. That night, as the boy dozed off clutching his charcoal-stained fingers, I lingered by his bedside. I brushed his hair back gently, whispering to the sleeping child, I'll make sure you never have to beg for love again. Not from me. Not from anyone. From across the room, Daniel's quiet voice answered, He's smiling. I turned. He was standing there, arms crossed loosely, gaze fixed on his son's peaceful face. He hasn't smiled in his sleep since before. His voice broke off, but the meaning hung heavy in the air. My chest ached. I'll give him more reasons to smile, I promised. Daniel's eyes lingered on me, softer than ever, before he nodded faintly. And in that moment, I realized, for the first time since I arrived in this story, we weren't just surviving together. We were beginning to build something real. Chapter 10, First Real Warmth. It started with stew, which, to be fair, was a risky gamble. My last attempt at cooking had been edible but barely. Still, something in me wanted to try again. Not just to fill stomachs, but to see if this house could feel like a home for once. So there I was, sleeves rolled up, hair plastered to my forehead with sweat, stirring a pot like it contained the secrets of the universe. The boy sat at the table, chin on his hands, watching with narrowed eyes. Suspicion was basically his default expression around me. Don't look at me like that, this is going to be good. I swear, I said, wagging the spoon. He sniffed. Last time it was salty. Last time was an experiment. This time it's a masterpiece. I shot back. When the stew was finally done, I ladled it into 3 bowls. The smell wasn't terrible. In fact, it was decent. We sat together at the table, the 3 of us. Daniel moved carefully, his tall frame awkward in the small space, golden eyes soft but wary. The boy sat between us, hands folded like he was bracing for something unpleasant. I held my breath as they each took their first bite. The boy chewed slowly. His eyes flickered, then he swallowed. "It's not bad." I threw my hands in the air. "I told so." Daniel's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "It is good," he said quietly. That was almost better than praise. The silence wasn't tense anymore, it was comfortable. Between spoonfuls, the boy muttered small complaints about the stew's carrots being too big, and I countered with exaggerated defenses. Daniel listened, his eyes moving between us, something warming behind them. Then, halfway through his bowl, the boy spoke. Not to complain, not to accuse, but softly, hesitantly. "Dad." My spoon clattered against the bowl. I froze, heart hammering. He flushed, staring down at his food, clearly regretting the word the instant it left his mouth. But I wasn't about to let it pass like nothing. "Say that again," I whispered. He hunched his shoulders. "Forget it." "No way." My voice cracked, and I leaned across the table. "You called me Dad. Do you mean it?" Silence. His small fists tightened on the edge of the table. Then, in the tiniest voice, "Yes." My chest tightened so hard it hurt. I wanted to cry, laugh, and shout all at once. Instead, I swallowed the lump in my throat and reached across the table to ruffle his hair. "Then I'll protect that word with my life," I said. The boy's eyes shimmered, but he ducked his head quickly, shoving another spoonful into his mouth like nothing had happened. Daniel was staring at me, not in anger, not in suspicion, but in something I'd never seen from him before. His gaze was warm, raw, almost disbelieving. "Maybe things can change," he murmured, so softly I almost missed it. I looked at him, then at the boy, and felt a surge of determination burn through me. "They already have," I said, and for the first time since I'd opened my eyes in this cursed story, I believed it. That night, as I cleaned the bowls and the boy drifted off to sleep with a faint smile on his face, I caught Daniel's gaze again. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to, because in that silence, in that fragile warmth, something unspoken had begun to grow. And this time, I wasn't going to let it die. Chapter 11: Healer's Scheme. I should have known the peaceful dinner wouldn't last. Stories like this never let you bask too long before throwing a bucket of ice water over your head. Sure enough, the next day, the snake slithered back. I was out in the yard, hanging damp laundry on the line, when I felt eyes on me. I turned, and there he was, robes crisp, hair gleaming, smile too polished to be real. The healer. "Darling, you've been avoiding me," he greeted, voice honeyed. I nearly dropped the sheet I was holding. "And yet here you are. Congratulations. You've discovered the meaning of avoidance." He chuckled, strolling closer. "No need to be so sharp. You know I only want what's best for you. For us." The audacity. My skin crawled. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You must be exhausted, caring for that beast and his brat. Don't you want more? More strength, more beauty, more freedom? I can give you everything. All it takes is a few more scales." I stepped back, grip tightening on the sheet. "Let me make something very clear. I'm not interested in you, or your sweet words, or your so-called gifts." His smile faltered, but he pressed on, reaching to brush his fingers over my arm. "Don't pretend. You always came back to me before. You always bent." I slapped his hand away, hard. "Newsflash. I'm not that person anymore. You don't love me. You never did. All you love is what you can take. And I'm done being your puppet." For a moment, the mask slipped. His eyes flashed with something sharp, ugly. "You think the beast will love you? You think he hasn't already guessed your betrayal? You'll tire of him again just like before. And when you do, you'll come crawling back." He hissed. I laughed, harsh and humorless. "Keep dreaming. If you think I'll trade Daniel's blood and pain for your cheap promises, you're delusional. Now get out." His face twisted. "You'll regret this, both of you. If you stand in my way, Then neither of you will survive what's coming. He spat. He spun on his heel, storming off, robes snapping behind him. Only then did I notice Daniel. He stood at the doorway, silent, golden eyes fixed on me. I didn't know how much he'd heard, but from the look on his face, it was enough. "Daniel," I started. He shook his head faintly, gaze unreadable, and turned back inside. My chest ached. Had he believed me? Did he even dare? But one thing was certain. The healer had declared war, and I wasn't about to let him win. That night, as the boy slept soundly for once, I sat awake, replaying every word, every threat. The healer had underestimated me. He thought I'd be easy to seduce, easy to manipulate. But he was wrong. This time, he wasn't just facing a foolish spouse. He was facing me. Chapter 12, The Kidnapping. I should have known the healer wouldn't stop at words. People like him never did. Threats weren't the end, they were just the opening act. It was early morning. The sun hadn't fully risen, but the boy was awake, chasing a chicken around the yard while laughing softly to himself. Daniel was inside, mending something with those big hands of his. I was just stepping out with a bowl of porridge when everything shattered. The boy screamed. I dropped the bowl. It hit the ground with a crack, porridge splattering over the dirt. My head snapped toward the sound, and my blood ran cold. The healer stood there, arm wrapped tight around the boy's waist. His free hand pressed over the child's mouth. The boy kicked, clawed, tears streaming down his cheeks. But the healer's grip was merciless. "Let him go," I shouted, rushing forward. The healer's smile was razor-thin. "Don't worry, I won't hurt him. Not if you cooperate." "You filthy. He's a child." My voice broke with rage. "A half-dragon child," the healer corrected smoothly, eyes glinting. "Do you know what his blood can do? Stronger than scales, purer than marrow. He's the key to everything. And he's wasted here." The boy whimpered against his hand. My chest twisted painfully. Daniel appeared in the doorway then, golden eyes glowing like fire in the shadows. The moment he saw his son struggling in the healer's arms, the calm in his expression cracked. Something primal rose in his face, something terrifying and beautiful all at once. "Release him," Daniel said, voice low, vibrating with fury. The healer only laughed. "Or what? You'll bleed for me again? Maybe I'll take the boy instead. His blood will fetch me power beyond imagination. With it, I can." He didn't finish, because Daniel moved. One heartbeat, he was a man. The next, scales rippled across his skin. Claws burst from his fingers. Wings erupted from his back with a thunderclap of air. His dragon form unfurled in all its terrible glory, black scales gleaming like obsidian, eyes burning molten gold. The healer's smugness faltered. The boy cried louder, reaching out desperately. "Father!" Daniel roared. The sound shook the ground beneath us, rattled my bones, made the chickens scatter in a frenzy. The healer stumbled back, clutching the child tighter in panic. I didn't think, I just ran. "Over here. You wanted me before, didn't you? You're after me too. Let him go and take me," I yelled, drawing the healer's gaze. It was a bluff, a stupid one, but I had to distract him, just for a breath. And in that breath, Daniel struck. He lunged with inhuman speed, claws swiping, wings crashing forward like a storm. The healer tried to dodge, tried to drag the boy with him, but Daniel's tail whipped around, knocking the bastard flat. The boy tumbled free, rolling across the dirt. I darted forward, scooping him up. He buried his face against my chest, shaking like a leaf. "It's okay. It's okay. I've got you. He won't touch you again," I whispered fiercely. The healer scrambled to his feet, robes torn, face twisted in fury. "You'll regret this. Both of you. Do you think the world will forgive a dragon gone feral? Do you think they'll let you live peacefully once they know?" Daniel's roar cut him off, louder, darker, final. He snapped his wings wide and reared back, every scale shimmering with raw power. For a moment, I thought he'd tear the healer apart right there. But instead, with a single beat of his wings, he drove the man stumbling backward, forcing him to retreat. The healer hissed, spat promises of revenge, then vanished into the trees, fleeing like the coward he was. Silence fell. The boy clung to me, sobbing quietly, while Daniel slowly shifted back, his massive form shrinking down until he was once again a man, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his temples. He looked at me, then at his son. His eyes were wild still, trembling with fear and rage. "Is he hurt?" Daniel's voice was hoarse. I shook my head quickly. "No." Shaken, but safe. I tightened my hold on the boy, then glanced back at Daniel. "Because of you." Something in his face softened, just barely. He reached out, hesitated, then touched his son's head with a gentleness that broke me. The boy sniffled, clutching Daniel's sleeve. "Father!" Daniel knelt, gathering him into his arms. His shoulders shook as he held his son close, burying his face in the boy's hair. I stood there, heart pounding, throat tight. Watching them, I felt something shift again. Not just trust, not just hope, something deeper. I had chosen this moment. I had stood my ground, refused the healer, shielded the boy, and Daniel had chosen too. He had revealed the truth of what he was, risked everything to protect his child. For the first time, it didn't feel like I was just a reader watching a tragedy unfold. For the first time, it felt like I was part of this family, and I wasn't letting anyone rip it apart again. Chapter 13, Confessions in the Night. The house was too quiet that night, too still. The boy had finally cried himself to sleep, curled up in his blankets like a little bundle of exhaustion. I'd sat beside him until his breathing evened out, brushing back the damp strands of hair from his face. Only when I was certain he wouldn't wake did I slip out into the main room. Daniel was there, sitting by the cold hearth. His back was hunched, head bowed, his hands dangling loosely between his knees. The glow from the single lamp threw his shadow long and jagged against the wall. I'd never seen him look so defeated. For a moment I hesitated, my chest squeezing. Then I stepped closer. "Daniel!" He didn't move, didn't even look up. But his voice, when it came, was so low, so rough, it felt like it had been clawed straight from his chest. "I knew." The words stopped me cold. "Knew what?" His shoulders shook with a sound that might have been laughter, but it was too broken to be anything but grief. "About the scales. About the healer. About everything." My breath caught. "I knew," he repeated, lifting his head finally. His eyes gleamed in the dim light, golden but wet, like molten metal fractured with cracks. "Every time he took them, every time you smiled at him after, I knew. But I told myself it didn't matter as long as you stayed, as long as you didn't leave me. I thought, maybe if I gave enough, it would be enough." His voice cracked. He pressed a trembling hand to his face. "God." I stepped forward before I even thought, kneeling down in front of him. "Daniel." His hand dropped, and I saw it. Rawness etched into every line of his face. Pain carved deep from years of bleeding for someone who didn't love him back. I was a fool, a rare dragon, they say. Strong, untouchable. And yet, I couldn't protect even myself. Couldn't protect my son from watching his father tear himself apart. "What kind of strength is that?" he whispered. His fists clenched hard enough that his knuckles whitened. I reached out, laying my hand over his. He startled, golden eyes flicking up to mine. "The kind that comes from love, even if it hurt you, even if it was twisted. You endured because you loved. That doesn't make you weak, Daniel. It makes you too strong for your own damn good," I said quietly. His breath shuddered out, and for a moment, he just stared at me like he didn't know what to do with my words. I swallowed hard. "But I'm not the same person you loved before. I can't be. I won't be. That man, he didn't deserve you. He didn't deserve your pain or your devotion. But My throat tightened, but I forced the words out anyway. "I see you. I cherish you. And I swear to you, I will never treat your scars like they're worthless again." The silence stretched, heavy, trembling, fragile. Then Daniel's hand turned under mine, fingers closing around me with a grip that was both desperate and gentle. "Lucas!" he whispered, like he was tasting the name for the first time. And before I could think, before I could second guess, I leaned closer. His breath hitched. Mine did too. Our foreheads brushed first, tentative, almost afraid. His eyes closed, lashes damp against his cheeks. My heart thudded so loud I thought it might shake the whole house. And then, softly, hesitantly, like a man stepping into sunlight after years of shadows, Daniel kissed me. It wasn't a kiss of hunger or fire. It was broken glass turned into something tender. It was trust stitched together by trembling hands. It was fragile but real. When we pulled back, his eyes were wet. His lips parted as though he couldn't believe it had happened. Neither could I. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. This was the first kiss that actually meant something. Not out of habit. Not out of desperation. It was the beginning of something real. Chapter 14, Healing the Past. By morning, it felt like something inside the house had shifted. Not just in me, not just in Daniel, but in the air itself. The boy clung to my side as we ate breakfast together, his small fingers clutching at my sleeve. He'd barely let me out of his sight since the kidnapping, and honestly, I didn't blame him. But this time, when he looked up at me, his eyes weren't just wary. They were searching. His small arms suddenly wrapped around me. He buried his face against my chest, muttering, "Dad, please don't leave again." I hugged him tight, blinking back the sting in my eyes. "I won't. Not ever. You're stuck with me now." Across the table, Daniel's gaze softened, so tender it nearly undid me all over again. Life finally began to smooth out, like ripples settling on a once stormy lake. Days passed without fear, without shadows hovering at our door. I cooked clumsily, but no one complained. Daniel fixed the roof. The boy ran wild in the yard with laughter that didn't sound broken anymore. At night, we sat together by the hearth, the three of us, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing little pieces of ourselves that felt precious simply because they existed at all. For once, the story wasn't all tragedy. It was, dare I say, warm. One evening, after the boy had dozed off curled against his blanket, Daniel and I lingered in the quiet. The fire cast a soft glow, painting his profile in shades of gold and shadow. He glanced at me, lips quirking faintly. "You're staring." I didn't deny it. "And what if I am? You're worth staring at." Color touched his cheeks. It amazed me how a man who could level mountains with his dragon form could still blush at simple words. "Lucas," he murmured, my name heavy on his tongue. I leaned closer, breath brushing against his. "Daniel." And then we kissed, slow, lingering, nothing rushed. His hand came up to cradle the back of my head, pulling me closer until I was practically in his lap. My heart hammered, not with fear but with the quiet wonder that this was real, that he wanted me, that he let himself have me. When we finally parted, he pressed his forehead against mine. "I never thought I'd be able to love again. Not truly. But with you, I can't stop." The words left me shaken. I cupped his face, thumbing gently over the faint scars at his temple. "Then don't stop. I don't want you to." His lips curved into the smallest smile, but his eyes, those fierce golden eyes, burned with something I knew I'd never forget. Weeks passed, and with them came the first signs that something inside me was different. I brushed them off at first, fatigue, nausea, odd cravings. It wasn't until one morning when I nearly collapsed, clutching my stomach, that Daniel's worried frown forced me to see reason. The village elder, a woman with eyes like sharp stones, examined me carefully. Then she gave me a look I couldn't quite read. "You are pregnant, the child of a dragon and human may carry life in either parent. And you are carrying." I sat frozen. Her words echoed, too heavy to fit in my skull. Pregnant. I was pregnant. By the time I stumbled back to Daniel, my hands trembled like leaves in the wind. He turned at once, catching my shoulders. "Lucas? What's wrong?" I looked at him, throat dry. Daniel. "We're going to have another child." For a moment, silence. His golden eyes widened, disbelieving, as if he'd heard me wrong. Then his breath rushed out, and he pulled me into his arms so tightly I thought my ribs might crack. "A child, another child. With you. He whispered against my hair, voice breaking. He was shaking, and I realized Daniel, the man who had endured bleeding himself raw, who had faced betrayal and ridicule, who had torn the sky open in his dragon form, was crying. I buried my face against his chest, heart swelling. We're going to be a family, a whole family. That night, the boy curled into my lap, chattering happily about names for his soon-to-be sibling. Daniel sat beside us, one arm around me, the other steady on our son's back. Do you think the baby will have wings? The boy asked eagerly. Maybe, but no matter what, they'll be loved, I said, ruffling his hair. Daniel's arm tightened around me. More than anything. I looked at them both. The child with eyes so full of trust now, the dragon who had finally let himself believe in love again, and felt the quiet thrum of life growing inside me. This was it. This was the ending I'd never expected when I first cursed my way through the bloody novel on my screen. Not tragedy, not betrayal. Family. Whole. Real. Ours. And for the first time, I wasn't just watching the story. I was living it.